a drink afterwards as well. And we'll be talking about don't forgetting your passes tomorrow as well later. The guys are reminding me. I'm really, really delighted to welcome Tanya Braga from the IOC to be with us today. She's the head of legacy. She has a long history involved with the subject, was involved in Rio and subsequently working for the IOC. We've had a few number of conversations, I think, over the years. And I think that without stealing Tanya's thunder, I think that, and we'll see how the conversation goes. Tanya's going to present to you, and then hopefully I'll ask some questions as well. But I think it would be fair to say, and we'll see whether Tanya actually agrees with this, that legacy, in my personal view, still is an often used word. We all claim to say that we understand what it means, but we actually probably come at it from very different perspectives. I know, Tanya, that some of the cities, particularly we've got people from the Gold Coast here, who have, been putting their own legacy programs in place, but not as part of the IOC program, but involved in Commonwealth Games and now obviously heading off their contribution to Brisbane 32. So the cities in particular are interested in hearing from you about what your thinking is around legacy. Obviously, the international federations also are wrestling with what's their responsibility and what's, again, a city responsibility. And a lot of the commercial companies will always ask, well, how can we contribute? So really, Tanya, the audience really is as broad church as you can possibly get. But we're all delighted that you're with us and spending some time. You've been very flexible about timings. And Tanya, by the way, I think, are you staying for a drink after this, Tanya? I think, yeah, good. Good Brazilian lady, you see. No caipirinhas tonight, I'm afraid. But Tanya's also joining us for dinner on tomorrow night at the Olympic Museum, okay? So she's a delightful person. So, Tanya, over to you. If I can give you this microphone, and if you join me here, because this camera, because obviously the online audience. Anyway, should we give Tanya a clap at the end of it? Come on.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today with you. So the idea for today was to share with you some news of a report that we have published a few days ago. And it is the first ever inventory of the most tangible part of legacy. Legacy is really a very broad subject. And I would say has a part that is the tangible, the buildings, the infrastructure in the city, and the human legacy, what it gives in terms of sport development, of bringing people together, education, culture. It's very broad. Today I will focus on the most visible and tangible side, that is the Olympic venues. So we took this initiative to look at all the venues that have hosted Olympic Games competitions, athletes as villages or ceremonies. And this is the first ever inventory of the use they have after the games. I think I'm not the only one who have seen some pictures in the media of closed, abandoned venues. Who here have seen this kind of picture before? Okay, quite a lot of people. So I also see. And we ask ourselves, what is the reality? How many venues? And it's interesting because when we visited, we came and I will meet the manager or the owner of a venue, and they would tell me, oh, this venue here is really very much used, contrary to the others in other places and other cities. And one after the other, I hear the same thing. This one is used contrary to the others. And then we say, okay, let's have a look and see the numbers, what is really the reality behind this perception. So we tracked the post-games use of all medal venues, villages and stadia across 51 editions, from very old one, Athens 1896, until Pyeongchang 2018. 923 venues, 89% of them permanent. So, what we mean by use, we look at both sport and non-sport use, but we look at regular use. What means? Just one example. We had a venue who have hosted 5 marriages. For us, it's not in use because there is no enough regularity. So we look for things like, is it open to the public? Is there a team? There are multiple events. There is some activity that's constant, like a school. Some of them, they became different things. They became museums, they became schools, they became headquarters of private companies, or a military place. All this we consider as use, and the key was regularity. I will do an exercise with you. Does someone here have seen the results of this research before? Or it's okay, so you two cannot participate, okay? So the others can. So I will ask everyone to stand so you can move a little bit as well. Okay? Everyone standing. So if you think that less than 30% of these 817 permanent venues are in use, please sit down. Less than 30%. Okay? If you think that 50% are in use, half of them in use. Okay? 70% still in use. We have very few optimistic people in this room. I can count you. So I would say that the optimists, you win. Because if we look at just the 21st century, okay, from Sydney to now, 92% of them are in use. And if we look at the whole period, since the first Olympic Games of the modern era in Athens, we get to 85%. So the optimistic people win. It's kind of surprising. I tested with another audience the other day, was more or less the same as here today. So 85%. And we have 15% not in use. From this, 11% are venues that doesn't exist anymore. They have been demolished. They gave place to other urban development. Some have been destroyed by war. Others didn't find a financial model, and it was cheaper to deconstruct than to keep using. And only 4% are standing, but not being used. It's been closed or abandoned. So it was much more positive, to be honest with you, than we all expect in this sense. And what we learned, we look as well, what were the key for success? And I think there is 3 main learnings here. First one is diversity, multi-types of use. So the venues that have multiple uses, they live longer. Second point, very interesting, it is the importance of continuous maintenance. It works better than big renewals over a few decades. And the third point is software is as important as hardware. So it means for the venues to live, you need to have interesting programs, activities. You need to take care of the human side. You need, if you want to have training activities, you need to develop the sport that use the venues. You need to train people. So these are really 3 key points. And another one that was important for us, things evolve with time. Some of those venues, especially the old ones, they have 2, maybe 3 different lives. They start as a venue mainly focusing on events. They became training. After that, it was more focused on leisure and grassroots activities. So they can have different lives and need to adapt to the time and to what's happening. Another finding, we asked ourselves, are there significant differences in venues that existed before hosting the games and those that were new at the times of the games? And the difference is very small. It's 83% for the existing venues that are still in use, and 87% for those that were new. And here, the explanation is quite easy to give. On the existing, you have more venues that are older, and the older the venue, the lower, I would say, the percentage of venues that are still in use, as we see before here. We had 92% for the 21st century games, and it was 70 something for the early 20th century. So age matters, but less than what we could expect before. We also look at the complexity and the size of the venues, because we could say, okay, if we are looking at stadium and the villages and the velodrome, swimming pool, ski jump, the big structure that cost more, how it will be. 87% of the complex venues are in use. So this was another interesting finding we had as well. And a fifth point that we would like to highlight for you is the proportion of temporary venues, that how it evolves over time. It was another interesting finding for us. 17% on the very beginning, the first games in the early 20th century, they were temporary, because I think the simplicity of the rules of the sport and the size, they were very small games compared to what we have today. It went down. On the late 20th century, we have the smaller number of temporary, and then now it went up again, and the tendency is, as we see in the conversations we have, for this to continue to go up because of technological materials and the flexibility that we need today. For the future of the Olympic Games, so we look at the past, but not just because we were curious, a little bit, but because we want to inform the future as well, and what it means for the future editions of the Games. So first, we have made changes lately, and now the requirements are much more flexible, with the objective to ensure that the games are sustainable and that they bring lasting opportunities. So first rule of today, maximum use of existing venues. So instead of building a new, why not renewing an existing venue, giving it, modernizing, giving it a new life? Only existing monofunctional venues for winter games. It means, just if you remember, one of the things we learned is that multiple use, it's a factor of success. So if the venues is mono-use, only existing. So don't build. Third, a robust legacy plan for any new construction, and this is even before the election, and we keep working with them on iterations to improve these plans. No minimum capacity, important thing, element for flexibility and sharing opportunities. If 2 or 3 sports could share the same venue, let's give flexibility, work with the federations, work with the calendar, so this can be possible. The result, if we look at the editions that are coming and the percentage they have in their master plans of venues existing or temporary, it's really high. Paris 95%, LA 100%, Milano Cortina 93%, and Brisbane 84%. And here again, flexibility is the rule. The games need to adapt the host, and not the host change to fit the game's needs. So if we look at LA, third games they will be hosting. It's a market that has so many good facilities and events, so they don't need anything new. If we look at Brisbane, it's a different situation. They have a very rapid demographic growth that is expected for the next 20, 40 years. They have needs in the communities, and the existing venues, in their case, were all planned, irrespective of the games, to work. 4 out of these 7 will work as community sports centers. So here the rule is really flexibility, adapt to the needs of the host. So I think that's it for the presentation of the results. The reports are available at our website, or just Googling 125 years Olympic venues post-games use, you can find. So just feel free to have a look at this and to share with your networks.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I think some surprising numbers in there for all of us. Questions for Tanya? Any in the room? Because if not, I want to. Yes, okay. You just introduce yourselves as well, if you would, so Tanya knows who she's speaking to.
Yeah, Peter Harrison, FGH Security. Just out of interest, was there any geographical variances in the numbers? Certain parts of the world whereby venues were 100% utilised and others that weren't?
Not really. I think we had, we have Europe, we have Americas and Asia and Oceania. We had cases, we can't see that there is a geographic explanation, no. It was, we could find a time one, but not a geographic.
Other questions? Yes, one at the back, if a microphone there, please. Tanya, we promise not to exhaust you, but we're okay for 10 minutes or so.
Hi, Bradley Smith, Around the Rings website. The programs for LA and Brisbane obviously are not set yet. So how does the city kind of prepare venues when they don't know exactly which sports are going to be included?
That's a very good question. So when a city is elected to host, they have a proposed master plan that's based on, I would say, the core sport program. And then for each edition, they can have some additional sports. In the case, for example, of Tokyo, we had surf, skate, climbing, softball, baseball, and BMX. Yeah. So they had this extra one. So this is not part of the master plan. So the numbers we have for future editions are based on the master plan they presented at the moment of choosing the host. With the additional sports, this can change once the program is completely finalized.
Yep, Mike. A mic for Mike. And the reason why Stephen Joyce, by the way, raised the point about BMX, because he's from the Gold Coast. And in case you missed it, they won the gold medal at Tokyo. Is that right, Stephen? There you go, okay. Because I had the privilege of meeting him week before last.
Oh, and they had basket 3x3 as well.
That's it, yes. Yeah. Mike.
Tanya, thanks for that. It was great reading the report, really interesting to see. And as you say, very surprising, because I think a lot of us kind of thought the numbers would be lower than that. But You used to do an Olympic Games impact study, which was done in Vancouver, and then you did one in London, but we haven't seen one since. And a lot of the topics I see is sustainability. Are you doing broader assessments of kind of the post-Olympics and then how those are going to happen in the future?
Yes, we do. For example, if we look, Tokyo is getting ready to publish by the end of this year their legacy report with KPIs on I would say, the lasting changes that were initiated or accelerated by the Games. They have published during the Games a series of case studies looking at preliminary results on that. And there will be a report coming now at the end of the year. Beijing has presented one report, a legacy report, before the Games. It was the pre-Games legacy report because a lot of those legacies are actually delivered before the Games. And they have two others to come, one 3 years after the Games and another at 5. What we're doing now, we're working, and I believe you know the initiative, with other events and with OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, to really have a kind of a common guidelines and some common indicators that major global events to measure the impact and the legacy in terms of local development. So the trend is that with Paris and after, we will be using this work, and they will publish the reports, one before, two after, following those guidelines of OECD.
Other questions are welcome. Yep, one at the back.
Hi, Tanya. My name is Clayton DeCosta, and I'm with Portes Consulting, but I'm also ex-London 2012 and Expo as well. But my question relates to, in the context of this report, do you define the Olympic venue as a purpose-built venue, or is it include, say, venues that have been, say, refurbished to deliver games?
We include all venues that host a medal, all villages for the athletes, and the venues for the ceremonies of open and closing. Some of them were existing before, and some of them were new, and some were temporary. We look at all of them.
Great. Really enjoyed the piece, by the way, as well. Thank you.
Questions? We've got time. If they're quick, well done, everybody. For me, nice and brief and concise. Very good questions. Great. So we're going to give you 2 more.
Hi, I'm Stephen. I'm an accessibility consultant. I have a couple of questions laced in one, if you don't mind. Do we have any legacy reports regarding the accessibility of the building and how many disabled people can now use the building? That's one. The second one I'm particularly interested in is the impact and legacy of disabled people in sport. Are we measuring those statistics? Yeah.
Thank you. For the most recent editions, some of them measured the improvements in terms of accessibility, not only of the sport venues, but, for example, in the city. What it has changed in terms of legislation, new kind of education program, for example, for architects or engineers that started because of the games, and we can find this information, but for the most recent ones. I remember that we had this information for London, for Rio, for Tokyo, Beijing, I'm not sure. I need to check for winter. But we had And I think it's an important point that for the reports in the future, make sure that they all have this. And in terms of sport as well, because we didn't have this common, I would say, grid of things they need to measure. Some have done and others don't. We expect that in the future they will all do.
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in, because we're talking a lot about sustainability at the moment. And a lot of people forget, if you look at all the sustainable goals, actually disability and inclusion, it interlaced in all of those, from communities, from sport, from education. So thank you very much.
Thank you. 'Cause I think what you're hearing from Tanya is that they're constantly looking at their own data and getting a handle. I mean, go back 125 years. That's seriously ambitious. Is there one more quick? Yes, there is. You're doing brilliant, you guys, for quick fire questions.
Hi, Tanya. I'm Amy Casterton from ES Global, and we specialise in temporary structures. So we did the water polo and shooting in London. We did 6 of the venues for Tokyo. Those have all come back to us, and some of them are going out for the Commonwealth Games, and we hope some of them will go to Paris again. I really loved what you said about the games the host city needs to run the games and not the games impose on the host city. That was brilliant. But my question to you is, what's the IOC doing to make the supply chain, people like us, do more and go further? We've had some events, particularly London, where the supply chain we really upped our game, and that's been great for us as a business. But really, we do need, I think, organisations like the IOC to say, no, come on, supply chain, you do more. What could these venues be in legacy? And I know from Rio that you did quite a lot of work with that, some of which was able to happen with the support of the city, some of which didn't come off. But I was my challenge back would be you need to ask us to do more, and we will step up to the plate. But it sometimes is just a federation to IOC conversation. I think sometimes we miss that supply chain, what can we do for you? And making venues zero carbon, because those structures that we continue to reuse are just reducing the carbon footprint of venues as well.
Yeah, just to thank you for your question. It's really good to not only push but partner with the supply chain. So the decisions on the supply chain, it's a decision from the organizing committee, not from the IOC. So what we do, we work with the organizing committee, for example, to help them define clear requirements for sustainability for their supply chain early on, communicate this years before so the supply chain can prepare. And we also promote conversations. For example, Paris and Milano is currently exchange on their sustainable and responsible procurement criteria. So they harmonize the criteria. So if a supplier is preparing to fulfill the requirements for Paris, they know that Milano Cortina will have similar requirements in terms, for example, the material. And when we talk about temporary buildings, in terms of sustainability, there is a big difference between bespoken, temporary, and I would say a modular temporary. The most sustainable is the one that can be built with modules that exist in the market and are flexible for other types of use. So this is also part of the conversation we have either with the federations or the organizing committees, that for the temporary buildings, they use, whenever possible, modules that already exist in the market and avoid bespoke design that it's more complicated to be made zero carbon, or that complicate a bit the reuse after. So these are some of the learnings we have, and we have this in part of our conversation.
Well, Tanya, we've taken more time than we planned to do with you. I think, this is a conversation I think it's really go on for a long time. And you started with a fantastic explanation about the permanent facilities, and I think it's a good debate about overlay. Apparently I've got to move closer to you, Tanya. Sorry about this. It's a camera thing, Tanya. It's but yes, so we've drifted into that second area. I think it's a very important debate about overlay, and I know there are people in the room that will enjoy speaking to you about social change. I think you've brought up this issue about the sort of legacy aspects that you've raised. There's trade, which other people have been running trade programs. So a lot to talk about, Tanya. And we obviously won't delay you any longer than now, but I think it would be appropriate to say a big thank you to Tanya. I know you can't hear the online people clapping, but Tanya, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
It's always a pleasure to see you. And let's have a drink now, and then we'll see Tanya again said on tomorrow night as well. So thank you again.